20 fantasy points, 17 fantasy points, 15 fantasy points, 14 and 13. Again, those are not the top 5 running backs on the week or the top 5 wide receivers on the week. Those were our top 5 kickers in week 8 fantasy football. And when you factor in all the injuries and all the bye weeks, there is no explanation of how valuable kickers are for week 9 fantasy football. So as always, we're going through the top 12 for week 9 fantasy football. And I'm one of the only creators who does weekly kicker rankings. So make sure to go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now, getting into our first tier right here, I've still got Brandon Aubrey at number 1, and he's taking on the Arizona Cardinals on Monday night in Dallas this week. Now, Brandon Aubrey, the one problem that we've had with him this year is that he's been kind of inconsistent as, related to the Dallas Cowboys offense. Like, I really thought that Brandon Aubrey would be in position to kick a lot more field goals than he did against the Broncos. He only kicked 1. So he had 6 total points in fantasy football. But against a worse off defense, the Washington Commanders, he had 17 fantasy points. That was a great week for him. Against the Giants in week 2, 22 fantasy points. Now, he's still the kicker number 1 in fantasy football right now, which is the reason why ultimately it's harder for me to rank him outside of tier 1. But on top of that, you add in the fact that Arizona's defense, not exactly one that's going to be fantastic, stopping them like the Broncos did. I'm going to have Brandon Aubrey at number 1 this week. Number 2, and to round up the tier, Chris Boswell. This is the elite tier of kickers right here. Chris Boswell, he was the guy who had 20 fantasy points in week 8. Now he takes on the Indianapolis Colts defense, which is kind of comparable to the Green Bay Packers defense. The Colts defense has been very good, but the one thing about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the reason the Boz, as we call them in Pittsburgh belovingly, is so good in fantasy football is because Aaron Rodgers has stabilized this offense enough to always make a red zone push. Now, Boswell, the reason he had 20 is because he had a couple 50-yard field goals this past week. That's not always going to happen, but he always will be in position to at least get some field goals out of the equation. So I've got Chris Boswell easily at number 2 in this elite tier. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've still got Eddie Pinheiro of the San Francisco 49ers at number 3, and he's going to New York to take on the Giants this week. So it's just a different matchup, right? The Giants defense compared to the Texans, they can't hold a candle to the Texans defense. The Texans defense stifled the entire San Francisco offense, and Eddie Pinheiro was bad in fantasy as a result. Now, he didn't kick a single field goal last week and had 1 extra point attempt, giving him 1 fantasy point, easily his worst of the season. That's why I'm not going too overboard on this one. San Francisco may actually get Brock Purdy back this week, but even if they don't, Mac Jones has proven time and time again to get his team into position. And the Giants matchup just doesn't make me fear the possibility of him not getting in position. I think he will be in position to kick a couple 40-yard field goals because they will stall out, but they still will be in position to score, and that's why Eddie Pinheiro is at 3. Matt Prater of the Buffalo Bills, I've got him at 4 this week, and he's taking on the Kansas City Chiefs in Buffalo. So with Matt Prater, he's been mostly good in fantasy football this year. He had a couple baddish games over the last month or so, but last week against the Panthers, 12 fantasy points. He kicked 5 extra point attempts and 2 field goals. So this guy just is on a scoring offense that we all know is very dominant with the Buffalo Bills. And then this week, they get the Kansas City Chiefs defense. Now, I believe that this will be a high-scoring matchup. I don't think the Chiefs are going to stifle the Bills' offense, just like I don't think the Bills' defense is going to stifle the Chiefs' offense. But I do think out of the two teams, I think the Bills probably come up short more than the Chiefs do, opening up more field goal opportunities for Matt Prater this week. Maybe he gets 3 field goals and 3 extra point attempts. I think that's on the table. So Matt Prater, to me, has a high floor and a really high ceiling this week. Tyler Loop of the Baltimore Ravens is at number 5, and he's taking on the Miami Dolphins on Thursday night in Miami. So a couple good things with this one, right? Tyler Loop is getting Lamar Jackson back. So that probably, on one hand, makes them a little less likely to get field goals in this matchup because they're playing a bad defense. And again, it's on Thursday night. So you automatically raise up every other option in fantasy football on Thursday nights except for defense, because defense is on Thursday night not usually very good. The Dolphins defense already stinks. What I ultimately think could happen with this one, even if Tyler Loop kicks one field goal and it's a 30-yarder, they'll get in the end zone 4 times. So I think he's got a really high floor this week and a pretty high ceiling as well. That's why he's at number 5. And Michael Badgley of the Indianapolis Colts is at 6. And of course, they're going to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. Michael Badgley, for the most part, been pretty good in fantasy as well. It's hard to not be when you're on that efficient of an offense. I mean, the Colts offense has been extraordinarily efficient the entirety of the season, and it's not about to stop this week because they're playing the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. That's not a very good defense in fantasy football, and I think that when you look at Michael Badgley, he hasn't had many ceiling games yet because, again, they're not being stopped and being forced to kick more than a field goal per game. They're getting in the end zone 4 or 5 times a game and have 1 field goal a game. That still gives them a good floor, not a great ceiling. So I think Michael Badgley this week is going to get in the end zone plenty of times with the Indianapolis Colts, get those extra point attempt opportunities, and also probably kick another field goal or 2 this week as well. He'll be a good play this week. And as I demonstrated at the top of this video, kickers in fantasy football, guys, you cannot overlook this position. And I guarantee you, these are guys that are on the waiver wire still. You need to make sure you utilize our automatic waiver wire tool to pick up these guys. Always what happens in the middle of the night, after priority waiver claims run through, there's a mad dash to the wire at 3 in the morning. You have to get up all disheveled, try to get a kicker because they're not priority ads. Our process automates that for you so you can sleep through the night, grab the kicker, and still beat your guys who are getting up at 3 a.m. to go grab the kicker that you ultimately got using our tool. We've gotten a lot of people who have gotten texts from friends saying, "How did you beat me on the waiver wire again?" Well, it's because they're using this league-winning type of tool right here, and it's only for $6 a month. And on top of that, you also get access to my top 250 rankings on a weekly basis, the comparison features, and the league sync-up features on our site as well. All league-winning tools for $6 a month and $5 a month if you want to do the full year subscription.
This is Ted. Look at him. Ted desperately needs to pick up a new running back, or his fantasy team is toast. For the 3rd year in a row. And losing his season again means one thing.
Oh no.
Don't be Ted. Use Fantasy Football Roundup to automate your waiver pickups and take a breather this season.
You got 7 more laps.
Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got Riley Patterson in that Thursday night matchup for the Miami Dolphins versus the Baltimore Ravens this week. I think that a couple things could be happening in this particular game. Number one, I nailed Miami last week when I said they're a dome team, and they are also a good team in their own house because the weather is a huge part of how well the Dolphins do on a weekly basis, particularly on offense. So they're back at home this week. I do think that gives them an edge from an offensive perspective. And I also think that the Baltimore Ravens defense isn't going to be good enough to stop them from at least getting in position to kick field goals. Riley Patterson, I do believe, has a 15-point ceiling this week, which is a massive deal because it could be a game-changing type of performance for your fantasy team with bye weeks and injuries. Last week he got 10 against the Falcons, and they only kicked 2 field goals. I think this could be a game where they kick 4 field goals and maybe 2 extra points. This is a big week for Riley Patterson, in my opinion. Will Lutz. Everybody has been asking me, where has he been all year? He's at number 8 against the Houston Texans in Houston this week, and Kaimi Fairbairn in the same matchup is at 9. So the way I look at this one, first of all, with Will Lutz, he's not given me a single reason yet this year to be inside the top 12. And everyone's been asking me, why has he not been in here? Well, if you look at his game log, he hasn't had a single double-digit fantasy game all season long. Now, he's had some good floor games like 8 fantasy points, 9 points, 9 points. He's had 4 9-point performances, which is fine. But the ceiling hasn't been super high. But that's also because Denver's offense has really turned it on and become a lot more efficient in the red zone opportunities. I think this week they take a step back. They play the Houston Texans, a great defense. I think there will be more field goals than touchdowns this week for the Broncos, making Will Lutz a better play in fantasy football. And Kaimi Fairbairn in the same matchup, I don't care who they play, that offense is never going to be super efficient. That's just not how they play football. He's going to end up getting 4 field goal opportunities in this game again. And the only thing that concerns me and the reason he's below Will Lutz at 9 is because I worry about the defense shutting down the Texans more, because they will have a pass rush that will victimize CJ Stroud. That's the one thing I worry about, but still, if you look at his game log, man, he's making everything that he kicks, basically, and he's had a really high ceiling of 18 fantasy points this year. Kaimi Fairbairn belongs in the top 10, and that's exactly why he's here. At number 10, to round out this tier, Jason Myers of the Seattle Seahawks, coming off the bye week, going to Washington to take on the Commanders. So again, all my rankings this week are as if Jaden Daniels plays. So until I see otherwise, that's going to be the case. I do think Jason Myers is on an offense that's actually been more efficient than you may think. Jason Myers is the kicker number 8 on the season, and he's had a couple duds because a lot of times they get in the end zone more than they kick field goals. Now, he has had 17-point games, 14-point games, 10-point games, because they do occasionally stall out. And I do think it could happen against the Washington Commanders because that defense isn't as bad as a lot of people think it is. But I do think ultimately his ceiling isn't the highest this week, and that's why he's at 10. Dropping down to our last tier, Andy Beregelis of the New England Patriots versus the Atlanta Falcons this week. In New England, I think it's a good matchup. Atlanta's defense is hot and cold already. There's weeks where they looked like they did last weekend against the Panthers, where they can't stop a nosebleed. And then there's other weeks where they really shut down a good offense, the Buffalo Bills. So I don't know exactly how to pinpoint this one because Atlanta is so inconsistent. But Andy Beregelis has been very consistent. He's missed only 3 opportunities this year, and his field goal percentage, it's actually been going up recently. He's had a 13-point game, another 13-point game, some 8 and 9-point games. He's been a good kicker this year, just on an offense that's been more efficient in the end zone than kicking field goals. So I do think that either way, if the Falcons suck, for example, they'll be able to kick enough field goals, maybe 1 field goal, to make him a good play. Or on the other hand, the Falcons defense does a good job at shutting down the Patriots offense, and they kick more field goals and extra points. You see what I'm saying? Either way, I think he's a good play this week. Number 12 to round us out, Cairo Santos of the Chicago Bears at Cincinnati this week. Cairo Santos has had a couple of good games. So he gets back this past week, and he does pretty well. 11 fantasy points, he missed a kick, but I do think that still, this is an offense that I can't trust. Against the Cincinnati Bengals, they're going to get in position because the Bengals defense is just so bad. Whether or not they capitalize on end zone trips, I have no idea. Caleb Williams does not look that great. They're an offense that leaves a lot on the table, which makes me want to buy in to a kicker like Cairo Santos because he has been mostly accurate and he is a guy that has a pretty good leg. So I do think that at Cincinnati, they'll put up enough points either way to make him a good play. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below. And if you want to see the top 12 defense rankings for this week, click on this video right here.